Welcome. It's my pleasure, as the director of the Toby Center for Jewish Life and Learning, to welcome you to this edition of TJHT Talks. I'm also honored to welcome our guest speakers, Katarina Friedla, Justin Jampol, and Grzegorz Piotrkowski, and our convener and moderator, Shana Penn. As usual, our conversation amongst our panelists will last approximately 45 minutes, and we encourage you to put your questions in the chat section to the right of your screen. We also would like to ask you a few questions, as we're curious about what your relationship is to the subject that we're about to discuss. So, were you active in Solidarity? If not you, were any of your friends or family active in the movement? Are you familiar with this story? Does it resonate in your life or in what you might have heard or seen? And have you visited any of the three cultural institutions represented here? The European Solidarity Center in Gdańsk, the Hoover Institution Library and Archives in Stanford, California, and or the Wende Museum in Los Angeles. So without further ado, I hand over the mic to Shana Penn. Shana.
Thank you, Halise. Can everyone hear me? Great. Also, thank you, Kuba and Kaya, and all of my Toby Center colleagues for hosting our commemorative conversation. And welcome to everyone. We have great representation from around the globe. This is very exciting. So it's often the case that historical anniversaries are occasion to reflect, celebrate, and question how much longer and on what basis will a particular given history continue to matter to contemporary and future generations. Solidarity's 45th anniversary this summer is an opportunity for such exploration, which is why I'm excited to introduce you to our guest speakers who represent three international museums and archives based in Poland and the US. Each of them preserves, interprets, and teaches very different publics about one of Poland's proudest civic moments in the 20th century. Welcome, Dr. Katarina Friedla, Toby Family Curator of European Collections at Hoover Institution Archive, Dr. Justin Jampol, Founder Director of the Wende Museum in LA, and Dr. Grzegorz Piotrkowski, Senior Researcher at the European Solidarity Center in Gdańsk. Each of your thriving cultural and educational facilities distinctively collects, exhibits, educates, convenes, publishes, and provides research opportunities on solidarity history specifically, and more generally on the Cold War era of anti-communist dissidents in the Soviet sphere and elsewhere in the world. So, imagine my surprise when recently a reputable publisher in Poland said to me, "Why do you remain interested in solidarity? No one cares about it or remembers it anymore. There's no audience for this. With so many unexpected disruptive events filling our world every day, it's not possible for solidarity history to attract widespread popular interest anymore. It has nothing relevant to teach us about current affairs." Well, that's our starting point for the first question. How do each of you bring, and your museums, bring solidarity's ethos of freedom, justice, and dignity, and its effective tactics of nonviolent resistance and coalition building to broad, diverse, and younger audiences as we move farther away in time and space from the Solidarity 1980s? I've asked our speakers to tell us about their institution's mission, history, and 2 or 3 achievements, whether in community impact, education, research, collections, or exhibitions. And if we may, Katarina, I invite you to speak first. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shana, for your kind introduction. Thank you so much for having me. I would like to start to say a few words about the history of the Hoover Institution, about our mission, and our collective activities. So the Hoover Institution at Stanford University was founded in 1990 by Herbert Hoover, a graduate of the university and future president of the United States. So it emerged from Herbert Hoover's first-hand experience administering relief operations during World War I. So initially, it began as a collection of documents and publications on World War I, and of course, American humanitarian aid to Europe. So Hoover recruited scholars to develop a robust collecting program to document the causes and consequences of political conflict with the ultimate goal of promoting peace. The institution quickly expanded its scope, beginning to gather materials that covered all aspects of social, political, and economic change throughout the 20th century worldwide. In addition to the archive and library, a research center was established to conduct studies on issues in politics, economics, and history. So you can see here on this slide, Herbert Hoover standing in front of the Hoover Tower. This photo was taken in 1951, and the tower was opened in 1941. As I've already said, in addition to the archive and library, a research center was established to conduct studies on politics, history, and economics. And I think it's worth to mention that the research team includes several Nobel Prize winners, as well as former and current members of the White House administration. So this is our Hoover Tower today, how it looks today. And in the background, you have the Stanford University campus. The Institute's current director is a former Secretary of State, Professor Condoleezza Rice, and it's a really great honor and pleasure to work under her leadership. Over the years, our institution has become an international hub for research and documentation, with more than 1 million volumes and more than 6,000 archival collections. It serves as one of the biggest knowledge repositories worldwide, gathering collections in 69 languages from more than 150 countries, pertaining to war, revolution, and peace in the 20th and 21st centuries. Our holdings contain the most extensive and comprehensive documentation related to modern Polish history outside of Poland. Among them are rich and unique collections of primary diplomatic, philanthropic, memoiristic, visual, and oral history sources. These materials span over a century of Polish history, including some of the most valuable archives of the Polish government in exile during World War II. Notable among them are the General Anders collection, as well as the files of the Polish Ministry of Information and Documentation, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Remarkably, these collections together include over 30,000 testimonies from survivors of the Gulag, 12,000 NKVD release certificates and related documents, forming actually the most extensive body on Gulag documentation in the West. After the fall of communism, the Hoover Institution established a partnership with the head office of Polish State Archives. And thanks to the generous support of Ted and Diane Toybee, an agreement was signed in 1994 that made the microfilming and transfer of archival materials to Poland possible. As a result, 18 collections totaling approximately 1.5 million pages were sent to Poland. They are now stored at the State Archive of New Files and are available online. So beside this, especially starting in the 80s, the Hoover Institution collected extensively material in Poland and continued after the fall of the Iron Curtain. As a result, our institution possessed the largest collection of solidarity documentation from the 80s outside of Poland, especially the collection of Polish independent materials, including thousands of monographic titles, is extremely impressive. Besides, there are thousands of leaflets, underground postage stamps, photographs, and so on available in the archives. Last but not least, the Hoover Institution has acquired several private collections documenting the Solidarity Workers movement, and I will talk about them later.
Thank you so much, Katerina. I actually became aware of Hoover's holdings on solidarity and the opposition when I first began my research in 1990. And now, Justin, please take the screen.
All right, thank you, Shana. And what a great way to kick this off and to be here with my colleagues. You know, I think so many issues, opportunities, challenges are shared by all museums, and especially museums in this space. And I'm so glad that Shana started this by speaking about how are we as organizations, as cultural institutions, connecting with our audiences. And I remember when I first started the museum about 23 years ago, right here in Southern California, of all places, very far away, physically and mentally in some regard from where our collections were created. I was told that specialty museums usually fail within the first 5 to 10 years because they can't formulate, they can't create, they can't develop a long-term audience. And that really stayed with me because what I realized was the problem was not the specialization, it was in the communication. How are we engaging people? How are we sharing that knowledge with a broad audience? And what I realized slowly over time was that the Wende would have to be an organization that would have to borrow, steal, would have to implement all different kinds of strategies in order to reach a big, broad public. And so we learn from art institutions, we learn from universities and education spaces, from schools. And what we really did was try to become a bridge between where the knowledge is, where the collections are, and transmitting it, and broadcasting it, and sharing it. And I think to me, that's been the ultimate challenge and ultimate opportunity, because as a result of that, the museum went from the back of a business park to having multiple buildings on the campus. Our attendance this year is more than double what it was last year. A lot of that's because what's going on in the news. I've been saying a lot recently, good for business, bad for the world. Unfortunately, there are places like this that are needed more than ever. They're needed more than ever because they can contextualize it, they can understand it. And that's why the name of the museum, Wende, is a German and Yiddish word that means transformation or change. It's about how our world changes all the time in front of us, around us, and how if we're thinking about where we want to go, we have to learn about where we came from. So the Wende is a place that is both engaging the community and also is an institution that engages with organizations around the world like this. There's so much more to talk about, but I should probably leave it there, only just to say that this is some of the images of the museum here. And as you kind of go through, you can see this is a former National Guard armory. These are some of our consumer products we have on view. We have our archives, collections, open storage where you can walk through and see place like this. And this is our building that we are actually opening in 2 weeks. It's now finished. It's a new cultural center on our Culver City campus. And at the end of the webinar today, I'll share a little bit more about what our future plans are. But the last thing I want to say before I hand it back over is that the way that the museum collects, we specialize in and prioritize at-risk collections. That means the kinds of collections you can't find anywhere else. And we try to find those scholars and the users, because we know that if the users get hold of these collections, they're going to create a special experience for the visitors. And a lot of our solidarity collections come from people who are in the movement, who were involved. And it's my greatest challenge and joy to connect with activists to save these collections so that they may be used and learn from, and that they ultimately might inform present and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. It's so interesting to hear the array of mission and aims of your collecting institutions, and the visually how each of your museums look or archives. And now, Grzegorz, I think we're all eager to hear about how the European Solidarity Center is doing in Gdańsk on the historic shipyard site. So please, the screen is yours.
Thank you, and good morning or good afternoon, whatever time it is and where you're listening to us. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm representing the youngest institution here because European Solidarity Center was founded in 2007. And in the first years, we had a very small office at the shipyard, in one of the shipyard buildings. But most of our energy was devoted to create the exhibition that is at the core of European Solidarity Center. But the vision that was behind the center, vision by former mayor of Gdańsk, Paweł Adamowicz, who was unfortunately murdered during a charity event in 2019, was not to be limited to a museum, but to go beyond this, to create some sort of a holistic cultural institution. Therefore, there was from the beginning a research department, archive department, and in 2014 the building was opened where we are today. That has a huge library, a 3-story high library, but also it has one of the floors that is devoted or given to NGOs that usually, because of lack of resources, do not have places of their own. So they can have a desk or an office in the building. And having this holistic philosophy, we not only focus on the exhibition, but also going out and reaching out to people, to local community, not only local, in the spirit of Solidarność. So what we managed to do, and we're really proud of, is we became a hub for Belarusian and Ukrainian refugees and migrants who have their Polish language lessons in the building. They can meet up. There's a special program for people who are newcomers to Gdańsk, just to make them more acquainted with the history of the city, its culture, its traditions, and just to make them feel more comfortable. What we also have is a publishing house. We do publish a couple of books per year, focus, of course, on solidarity, not only historically, but also contemporary instances of solidarity among people. We also have a film festival. It screens documentary movies that are connected to human rights, to struggles for independence, for freedom, and so on. And of course, alongside with the exhibition, we have a very ambitious educational program, starting from kindergartens, finishing with PhD students. And especially in the summertime, it's a really busy place. We have roughly about 1 million visitors per year, which sometimes causes some problems, but we're very happy that so many people want to visit us, to see what we have to say, what we have to show. And also we are organizing seminars, public debates, roundtables, and conferences. And next one will be next week, actually, to commemorate the 45th anniversary of the birth of Solidarność. So yeah, over the years, what we managed to do is to become a very important place on the map of Gdańsk. Actually, if you look at the reviews, we are the second most popular tourist attraction in Gdańsk, the old town being the first one, but it's rather hard to beat. But a lot of people became used to visiting us quite frequently because of all the things we organize, we do every day. So these are the highlights that of what the center is, and it's constantly developing, it's constantly expanding, and not only in size but also in the outreach, because for instance, now we are consulting the formation of a quite similar institution that will be in Lviv in Ukraine. And here you see some images from the center. This is how it looks inside. There's one of the events called one of the roundtables that is referring to the historical roundtable negotiations of 1989. And there are also other events like that. This is how it looks from the outside, and it looks very rusty, but that was actually the point of the architects because they wanted to make a reference to the shipyard where we are located. Because in this particular part of the shipyard, huge sheets of metal were stored to build ships. And they, of course, started rusting. So that's why outside of the museum looks like rusty metal. The first image you could see is actually the most precious thing in our collection. These are the original boards with the 21 demands of the strike committee in 1980. They're stored at our exhibition. So this is one of the highlights of our collection. So I'll give the mic back.
Grzegorz, can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. Good to see the Solidarity Center again, and I look forward to being there next week. So you raised publishing, and I'm still thinking about that Polish publisher. That publisher doesn't think there's substantial public interest in solidarity, that there's no market. Yet each of your institutions publishes books and journals, and scholars and students use your libraries and archives. So if we can come back to you, Grzegorz, I'm hoping that you could start us off by providing a brief historiography of solidarity. And as you said, you'd be speaking mainly about those works that are published in English or translated into English. So please.
Thank you. However, I would like to start with this question of whether there's interest in solidarity or not, because there are two answers to that. Of course, there are not that many works on solidarity anymore. There are some, but they're not probably as popular as we would like them to be. But on the other hand, there is a vast interest in what has happened. And in 2018, there was actually research commissioned by the government to be presented during the 100th anniversary of Polish independence in 2018. And people were asked a simple question: what are the three main events of the 20th century that you think are the most important in Polish history? And 1989, the peaceful overthrow of communism, became the most important to people. So it still is in people's memories. But the problem is that, as you mentioned, I will focus on English language literature. And this is actually a big challenge, because there is a vast array of publications in Polish that are unfortunately not translated into English. There are books by Antoni Dudek, who actually now has a very popular YouTube channel with hundreds of thousands of views. With his videos are not very YouTube-like. He talks for an hour and a half about some issues from Polish history. and it's more like an academic lecture. Nevertheless, he has hundreds of thousands of views on each of his episodes, so that there is a demand for that. But when it comes to Solidarność and the historiography, there are a couple of points of contention. First of all, one of the books that I think it would be best to start with is Alain Tourin's book on Solidarność, written in 1980, published for the first time in 1981. Surprisingly, published in Polish only in 2011, actually, by European Solidarity Center. But there's a great book by Jan Kubik, The Power of Symbols Against Symbols of Power, also only recently translated into Polish. And from that, I think that would be a great departing point. But I was actually talking to my boss today about it, and he pointed to one quite important thing, that we can talk about history only when it's 100 years after. Between that, when it's those historical events are too close to the times we live in, it's more politics. And this is very, very clear in the case of Solidarność, that Solidarność became entangled in political discussions. And not only some discussions are politically motivated or politically influenced, but also it was a huge movement. 9 million or 9 to 10 million people in a 35 million people country. So there are a lot of interpretations of what Solidarność was. There are three main interpretations, this being a movement for national independence, the second one that it was a workers' movement, and the third one it was a civic or social movement that was acting according to liberal principles. So there's a heated debate which of those interpretations is correct. And to be honest, I think all of them are correct, because in such a broad and huge movement, you can always pick some arguments to support your thesis. However, in the recent years, there are other quite brave interpretations of Solidarność being a Republican movement, but also, and this is these are works of Jan Sowa, a Polish sociologist and cultural studies professor, who claims that Solidarność was a true communist movement. When he focuses on the first Solidarność from 1980 in their program, he says that it's very similar to what actually was in the Communist Manifesto: workers' councils, citizens' councils, civic control over public institutions, and so on. So, as you can see, there are debates on that. And it's still going on, and still new documents are being found or being analyzed. Actually, a colleague of mine, Michał Przeperski, was recently at Hoover Institute, and there he wrote a biography of Mieczysław Rakowski, because that's where his memoirs are stored. So there's still something going on, and now I think we are entering the phase of analyzing Solidarność not only as a historical event, but looking at the long kind of path dependency of Solidarność. What was its impact on 1989, on 90s, and on what is its impact on today's politics? And again, it's sometimes it becomes a heated political debate with some people trying to create an alternative narrative, shifting focus to other people, to other heroes of 1980 and the 80s, but it's still a debate, it's still a discussion. So I think there is a market. However, it's problematic to sell it to the people. And actually, as just to finish, as one of ways to do that, that was the motivation behind founding of the European Solidarity Center, to bring this history back to the people, but also to show its consequences and lessons that we can learn from that historical past. And if you look now at the marketing language of municipality of Gdańsk, Solidarność is very visible there and very present. which I think is quite great, and it contradicts a little bit to the statement of the publisher you were talking to.
Right. Thank you, Grzegorz, and I hope we can come back to some of this with you as after we hear from our other colleagues. Katerina, does research or the directions of research influence how Hoover collects, and vice versa? Does collecting influence the research, and how do you work with that, with your Polish archive and Solidarity in particular?
So that's a really excellent question. What I can say that the history of the Polish anti-communist movement and the Solidarity workers movement still matters. So we continue to collect, preserve, describe, and make available for research the most important material and archival collections related to the Solidarity movement. We also try to build connections to these records through a robust program of fellowships, workshops, exhibitions, and outreach. A few years ago, we had a special exhibition entirely devoted to the Solidarity movement. We also closely work with our research fellows on a wide range of projects, including exhibitions, as I said, acquisitions, conferences, and publications. And among them is a senior fellow Professor Timothy Garton-Ash, Professor of European Studies at Oxford, who joins us each summer for his research residency. And as you know, he's really a great esteemed scholar on modern Polish history. He also supports us, in terms of, looking for a new material and acquisition possibilities on subjects connected to the Solidarity movement. And yeah, it's a great honor and pleasure to work with him. We're also actively engaged in research and teaching, regularly hosting Stanford classes and integrating our archival materials, of course, including documentation on Solidarity into academic work. And from my experience, I can say that there is a lot of interest. So the young people from around the globe, for many of them, which is very surprisingly for me, the history of Solidarity and the 80s and in Poland and the former Eastern Bloc is very well known. So we're also working with a wonderful visual material, the Solidarity posters and photographic material. And finally, I would also like to highlight the long-standing scholarship program offered by the Hoover Institution. So each year, numerous scholars from Poland come to conduct research here. And it's also a priority for us to ensure that these invaluable collections remain accessible to as many researchers as possible. And Grzegorz mentioned Michał Przepersky, who had a fellowship and worked on Rakowski's biography. This year we will host two scholars who want to work on the independent publications and the yearly samizdat publications from Poland. So I think this subject is still important, and we are trying to do our best to promote it.
Thank you, Katerina. It's heartening to hear that there are people and young people from around the world who are aware of Solidarity history and look to you for your resources. I'd like to move a bit away from historiography to education, because a museum's function is in what's known as informal education. And for the Wende, in addition to your research offerings, Justin, the Wende has robust educational programs for middle and high school students, and also for the broader community. The Wende works with the local school districts, summer camps, the Polish consulate, the Polish community, and the excellent universities in Southern California. So tell us a bit about your educational approach, activities, and experiences.
Well, I mean, There's so much here, and I guess I want to start by referring or referencing another thread of the discussion so far, which is the closeness of the history, right? Like there is this interesting time that we're in where it's not a history yet that has a narrative that everybody agrees on. It's still conflicted, which makes it actually interesting, dynamic, and I would argue useful in terms of education. Because first of all, you're dealing with movements that in which young people are not that far removed. First of all, chronologically, a lot of people involved here are their parents, not great grandparents, not something with black and white photos. This is in, I mean, and when you come and see the exhibitions here, I mean, some of these photos look like they could be taken, yesterday. And I think that sort of visceral, aesthetic, visual connection is powerful. And let me just say this too, that whether it's solidarity, which is one of our subjects and our specialties, Velvet Revolution, Soviet Jewry, and the Refuseniks, these are all grassroots movements. And you know what? They're grassroots movements involving opposition to authoritarian power. They are about resistance, organization, dissidence, overcoming adversity, activism, globally, locally. Like, could there be anything more juicy than that these days? And so it's all about connecting with these young people and engaging them and, giving them the opportunity to have their own relationship with the materials. And I think that's a really important part of this, is that you need to give them their own way. Instead of telling you must know this, this, and this, I call it a choose your own adventure. You give them the material. And if you can show some of the pictures, I'll give you some examples of what I mean by that. So one of the things that we do is the samizdat. We have a whole collection of underground newspapers, brochures, leaflets to show how people would create their political flyers, right? And I'll tell you, it's like low-tech social media, as Shana said to me once, that this is sort of like when you teach people the mechanisms and have them do it themselves. I'll tell you, there's no faster way to get something in the digital realm than having it created in the physical realm. Because what inevitably occurs, of course, is that they make their own screen print or their flyer or their brochure. They snap a picture of it, boom, there you go. They have young people doing their own samizdat or scrapbooking or whatever it is. So they learn the history of how these grassroots movements collaborated, how they communicated, and ultimately what they accomplished. I think that's another thing here, right? Like, these are all movements that were extraordinarily impactful and successful. I mean, you talk about the Refuseniks and overcoming adversity in the former Soviet sphere. I mean, that's an amazing story to share. And solidarity is another example of this, where the power of people coming together. And then let's go to the next picture, because what I want to show is the snapshot of the solidarity display we currently have up in the museum, curated by our very own Shana Penn. And this shows you that point, that it's not just about sources of information on its own. It's about how you connect. And solidarity was a visual movement too, right? Like, these are really graphic. They're really engaging. That the solidarity icon is iconic, and I mean, that means that it was a great way to rally support and initiatives. And you go to the next picture. This is a commentary on also Shana Penn. We just had this event last Saturday. Full house, 200 people. We eventually we went up to go look at the archives and go the next pic. We went to go look at the archives in this room, which is all around, and it was standing room only, couldn't even get more people in there. So this is just to say, to answer that first and important question from Shayna, like it's really about finding the ways to translate our collections to broad audiences, whether it's young people, adults, or even the historical witnesses. And Los Angeles, I know we're going to talk about this in the third question, but LA is one of those places where all different kinds of communities from other parts of the world, and we talk to everyone. So that's it from me for now.
Thank you, Justin. This is all great. And so at the Wende last weekend, someone asked an interesting question, and it was someone who was not of Polish descent or Polish or had any previous connection to Solidarity and was learning about archives and collections. And he asked, so why would Polish people donate their private collections to an American archive and not to a Polish archive? Shouldn't these materials remain in their native country? And it led to this great discussion, and I want to hear from the three of you about this too. So Katerina, could you start us off?
Yes, another excellent and extremely important question. I think it's a very complex question, and probably this question is connected or it depends on the time span and historical or political situation. And just to give you again the example of the materials of Polish government in exile, after the Second World War, the authorities decided to move the bulk of the archive to the west coast of the United States. And they thought at that time that the Hoover Institution is the most secure, safe place in the world. And I think because the collection were dispersed across Europe, and of course they had a lot of very sensitive information about people who stayed behind in the Soviet Union, in the Gulag, or under the Soviet rule. Later on, I mean, during the communism period of time, the collections who came to Hoover originated from people who fled Poland, so mostly dissidents. Such an example is Irena Lasota collection, which we have in our archive. I just want to mention that my predecessor, a wonderful curator and a good friend, Maciej Siekierski, went to Poland after the fall of the communism, and the Hoover Institution founded a branch in Warsaw. So Maciej worked for 2 years in Warsaw and sent to Stanford nearly 3 tons of materials, mostly independent publications, but also some private collections. At that time, I think there was no such interest in these documents. I also think that the archival infrastructure was still, in very bad shape. And many people probably, because of the very tough transformation process, were not really interested in collecting this material. On the other hand, we have the wonderful underground archive Karta in Warsaw, which started to operate in the 80s. So there was still possibility to transfer this material to Karta. But while talking to many people, not only in Poland, while I acquiring material also in Germany or France or the UK, I very often hear the same, sentence or remark that we feel that the material will be much more safe and secure on the West Coast in the United States. So I think it's a very hard to give one answer to this question, and it always depends of a political situation and probably also individual decisions.
I think, I was doing my research in the late 80s, early 90s in Poland and other countries, and people still were holding on to their personal collections and not feeling safe to give it to a state institution because it wasn't clear how the state was developing. And I could understand, given Hoover's long history of collecting from Poland and on behalf of Poland, that people would feel like they could entrust Hoover with their documents, and I think that's so important. Grzegorz, tell us about the Polish side of things. How do you look at this as a security issue? Do you find who is it that does donate to the European Solidarity Center and why? How do you answer this question?
There's a broad range of people who donated, from people who were active in the 80s and just want to do something with their personal archive, personal collection, or their relatives who don't want to throw it away after their members of family have passed, and they think that that might be a good place to donate it. Actually, once we've received a tin box full of lapel pins, and it turned out that they were gathered by a policeman in the 80s who took them as trophies from people he arrested. And it was over 4 kilos of those pins that somebody found in their basement after this person died. So, but we also try to acquire bigger collections, and this is actually might be one of the reasons why some people decide to choose, especially U.S. institutions, is that some people try to sell their collections, and this is something that for us, it's hard to compete with because of budget restrictions, of course. And there have been quite a lot of cases like that where people openly said that, like the wife of General Kiszczak, who was openly saying that she wants to sell his archive to the highest bidder because she wanted money. So this is one reason. The reason that Katerina mentioned security is also, I think, plays a role here, because in the 90s, as you said, Polish institutions were constantly underfunded, and that's also the case with independent archives. They always are short on funding, and it's a problem. And if you have a precious collection, you don't want to donate it to an institution that might disappear in 2, 3, or 5 years, obviously. The second, the other argument is again connected to politics, because this is also an issue of safety. As I mentioned, Poland is quite a polarized country, also on the issue of solidarity. So that is why, for instance, we never got the archives of the Central Commission of Solidarność Union, although the agreement was that it will be donated to European Solidarity Center. Because of some political developments, they decided not to hand it over to us. So they are there. And the problem is that these archives are scattered among a plethora of institutions. In Gdańsk, we have this Komisja Krajowa, the Central Commission of Solidarność, but we also have the Institute for Instytut Dziedzictwa Solidarności, Institute for Solidarność Heritage. We have the Institute for National Remembrance, which is a state institution. We have European Solidarity Center, and probably a couple of others. And they are sometimes being brought into political conflict, which also doesn't assure the donors that their collection will be safe, that it will be presented, that will be accessible, but also it won't be part of political struggle. And this political issue is also that some people don't like this or that institution. That's why they choose to donate to other institutions. And donating it to a foreign institution is a way out of this problem.
Thank you. And then also, I'm assuming that your collections are all online and you can share them, and they are shared, or they are used by people who can go to any one of your online collections. Justin, if you could talk, I know that you said a bit about how you collect, and you do have a unique way if you would like to add to this part of the discussion. But the other part of, we're talking about geography, is how do you do what you do in LA? And how is it that the Wende understands and contributes to LA culture? I mean, I witnessed it firsthand that there were standing room only 200 people at the program last weekend. I mean, that was a great feat.
I think
tell us.
so. I think a lot of that is credit to the ways in which, first of all, people have a certain sense of curiosity about the world and each other if given the opportunity. I call it like the on-ramps to the freeway. And, I think they know that when they come to the Wende, they might not have a direct connection to it. And I loved the way that Shana started off the program when she was here, when she asked how many people know about the movement or know somebody who was even involved, and those who know nothing. And it's both. It's a smattering. You need to be able to talk to both of these people. And I like the fact that LA is both a city filled with people from all around the world, so that we're already now used to this as a city of immigrants in so many ways. So we already understand that other people's stories are our own. So I think that sort of culture of LA helps. And then this idea of the mental and physical distance sometimes is psychic or mental distance. That sometimes there's a benefit to actually being slightly removed from this all, because because the history is so recent, as we just heard, that it can be so easily political and politicized and endangered. I mean, one of our specialties is, I think in some ways, we have what we call the special projects here, and part of it is going into places to acquire or rescue or preserve at-risk or endangered collections. And the obvious place for that now is Ukraine, right? Like, we're trying to get stuff out of there because it's at risk. And the idea is, once these historical sources are gone, they're gone forever. We can't write them. We can't use citations. We can't write books on them. So it's really the mandate, at least of our museum, to be able to identify what are these collections that if we weren't here, that would be gone, and how do we embed ourselves within those communities to be able to even identify or know what collections need to be saved. And in solidarity, we connected with a local Tomasz, and he is an extraordinary. He was an activist in solidarity, and Tomasz Ozinski went to Warsaw to help get the Adamichnik papers out of a suitcase that was hidden behind a drywall. And my line always about this is sort of like, we're not buying things at Christie's and Sotheby's here, right? Like, these are things that, like, if not for somebody taking them from Warsaw to here in this particular case, they would continue to dwindle. And then I just want to end by saying that, like, and that in a way, the response about why Los Angeles too is somewhat answered by the fact that, because we're not interested in the thingness of it, we're interested in the information that it provides. Ultimately, for example, when the Ukrainian materials come here, we digitize it, conserve it. Ultimately, if it needs to go back, or once it's safe, it will go back, and that's 100% fine. We really think of ourselves as stewards and caretakers for the collections, and ensuring that historians have what they need. And then, could you pull up the picture, please, of that I had for questions? Because I just want to kind of conclude with this, which is that, like, to me, the amazing thing is, you could take a briefcase or suitcase from behind a drywall in Warsaw, and you bring it to LA and you can create an event around it and engage people, whether it's through music, from that part of the world, whether it's community, whether it's gathering, whether it's about the study of movements and history. And you have an event like this, which we had just a couple of weeks ago, that's on the looking down at our campus from the 3rd floor of our new building. And then ultimately, and finally, the last picture, this is our future, the forthcoming Research Institute, which is where the full cycle will be finally culminated, and which it will be from research, from the conservation, from rescuing of the materials, to the broadcasting of them in our Culver City campus for schools, for young people, for education, and for the public.
Thank you. And this has been great when I can see that my prompter, Elise Lieberman, is back, and which means it must be time for Q&A. And I'm going to turn it over to Elise.
Well, first, we're delighted. This conversation is very compelling and actually eye-opening for many of us. I wanted to share that while there have been no specific questions, a lot of people have actually shared what their experience has been, either personally or their family, or how they were involved in it as a researcher in the comments. And we will share those comments because this has really opened a global conversation. And each of you have referenced the importance of solidarity and its legacy, how it's being transmitted, whether it's through research, whether it's experiential programs, whether it's through, gathering, creating publications. And also, I think we'll want to leave our audience wanting more. I think that they're very intrigued by what is solidarity, what grew it, what were the founding factors or the impetus, what made it that moment in 1980, 81, where suddenly this became the movement that it did and grew throughout the decade. And also, what are those impacts? And I think you've all mentioned it and so eloquently in terms of solidarity as a model. The other piece of that, what you added, which I think is also really important, is the model is there, the actions are there, the impact is still being felt, as Grzegorz mentioned, and all of you mentioned, that the impact of this movement, like other such profound movements, is still out there. And people will reference it. And I think we appreciate the fact that you brought it back to the table, back to the screen on this 45th anniversary of its real founding. So I would like to ask if any would like to make a final comment. Of course, Shana, if you allow, and then to Abby, and we'll close. Unfortunately, we'll have to close, but we will be back. Yes, Shana, please.
I just want to add to what you said before we hear from our colleagues, that each of these institutions have recordings, video recordings and podcasts of speakers and of conferences. You can hear Timothy Garton-Ash on the Hoover Institution archive collections site. And you can hear me at the Wende Museum. And there are ongoing conferences at the European Solidarity Center. So I just wanted to add that, but I'd like to hear from each of you if you have further comments to make, or would you have a question or comment to one another?
I'm impressed with all the comments here. I'm just now getting into them, and there's such a broad range of them, and I think a lot of them, or at least a couple of them that at least I see, are about collaboration and the extent to which we are communicating and in touch. And I mean, I think this is where having ambassadors is so important. Shana brought me up to the Hoover, where I met with Katerina. And, I think already when we're in each other's spaces, it's such a useful way to be able to sort of get a sense, both for the culture of the place, but also the opportunities that there might be for collaboration and partnership. So I think I think there's a lot of really great potential there. And as the world is becoming, more globalized in terms of just even the technological capacity to do something like this, which would have been impossible even a few years ago. The technological ability to collaborate is so much more robust now than it ever was.
There is a question from Ed Serrata in Vienna to Grzegorz. You have had 1 million visitors in 1 year. That's impressive. Can you break it down? How many come from school groups, as school groups? How many visitors are Poles? Can you do you know about the visitorship, Grzegorz? You may not.
Yeah, not in details. And this 1 million people per year visits the building. The exhibition is visited by around 350, 400,000 people annually. And I would say it's half and half, Poles and foreigners. Because a lot of the Polish audience is, a lot of school groups make up for the Polish audience. And this is actually one of the problems with teaching history in Poland, that it's taught chronologically, and there's never time to reach to the 21st century in a history course. When I'm teaching freshman students at the university, I always ask which of you had the history of Solidarność at high schools, and out of 15 people, maybe 3-4 raise their hands, because they usually end at World War II and then nothing. And there was actually there's a project to make a new course in middle schools, history and contemporarity, and that also became a very heated political debate about the textbooks, etc., etc. So it shows that there is an interest in those times, but sometimes there's not enough time to teach the kids at high schools this history. That's why they come to European Solidarity Center, because in 2.5 hours they can actually learn the Polish history from after World War II until 1989, 1990.
Gosh, if I may, I just want to ask. Yes,
Peggy Kerpinski is informing us that Lech Wałęsa is on a North American speaking tour, and it starts next week. And we can probably, there is a website. If you look up Lech Wałęsa North American tour, you would find that on the internet. Thank you,
Shana.
Okay.
Katarina, tie us together.
So I think what Justin just said, I'm a great supporter of the idea to work together, to collaborate. And this is what I'm trying to do in Poland too, and in Germany and other European countries. Because also because of our nowadays technical tools, our digitization progress, we can really very easily share or exchange materials. And I'm a very great supporter of, collaborating on exhibitions or events together. And I think, we just made the first step, and I very much hope that, we will have the chance to work together in the future.
Bravo.
Thank you for those wonderful closing remarks. I know we don't want to finish or this conversation. I know members of our audience don't either. So I would like to suggest we will reconvene at another time to explore some of the issues that we haven't yet touched on, but also to talk more about solidarity and its history, as I mentioned before, and where it is now. And the remembrance is here in Poland. And as was mentioned, there's those who were and those who weren't. How does that dynamic play out, especially today when, politics divides many? So first of all, Shana, thank you for convening and moderating. Your inspiration has brought us together. Thank you, Justin, Katarina, and Grzegorz, for joining this very insightful conversation, and for all the work that you do in preserving and transmitting not only the legacies of solidarity, but other historical movements that have had an impact and continue to impact us today, especially reaching out to people for whom ancient history is 22 years ago. So I would like to, I also want to thank our audience for joining us tonight, or for those of you who are watching us on YouTube, thank you for joining us on YouTube. Thank you also to the team, to Jakub, Kaya, and Zosha has joined us. Those are the people that make the magic happen so that we can have these conversations. And I would like to ask you, invite you to join us in supporting this program. It's your contribution, your individual or corporate contribution, that keeps us able to bring more and more episodes covering more and more issues to you and to the wider public. Please join us on September 17th for our next session, though that we might include one in between. And of course, you'll know if you're now on our mailing list. I wish everyone a good evening, a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And if we didn't answer your questions, find us.
We'll make that possible.
Thank you.